Hi, my name is Stacy Roshan. I am the Director of Innovation and Educational Technology at Bullis School, and I'm also the author of Tech with Heart. I'm so excited to be able to share with you today on the topic of how we can leverage technology to make sure that all learners in our classroom have an opportunity to express their voice, their thinking, and so that we can celebrate all ideas in the room. I want to start my presentation today by throwing a question out there to spark some wonder and get those wheels in your head spinning. Some of our smartest students might be our quietest. How do we give them an opportunity to be vocal in classroom discussion without calling them out or making them feel uncomfortable? Some of our unsung superstars may need time to think about their answers before speaking up. How do we shift from a culture of calling on and praising the student who's first to raise their hand? How can we shift from a first is best culture to one that sends a message that everyone's voice matters and that everyone has the potential to excel in the classroom? This question matters deeply to me. As a student, I was introverted, I was a perfectionist, and I needed time to process. I have never been an on-the-spot thinker. I need time to formulate my response before saying it out loud. When I was in school, the classroom environment did not feel made for the type of thinker and student that I was. When in class, my peers raised their hands and answered many more questions than I could, I struggled to feel like I measured up. I started to confuse faster with smarter. Before I move on in this presentation, let me just take a step back and tell you a little bit more about my personal story and why this does matter so deeply to me. And let me give you a little bit of a backstory. As a student, I was that introverted perfectionist in the classroom, and I didn't always have a way to express myself. In the classroom environment that I was in, I didn't have a way to communicate with my teachers in a format that best fit my needs. Yes, I was a processor. I needed some time to think before I was ready to answer a question on the spot. But also, I was struggling silently inside. I felt like I always needed to achieve the highest grades. An A plus was perfect for me. And so I developed this unhealthy relationship with this idea of perfection. And I wish that I could have had a teacher to help me reframe what being the perfect student meant. As a teacher now, I really look for ways to connect with my students on a more personal level to see how they're feeling on a daily basis so that they can express any of those internal struggles. For me, that drive to perfection as a teen led to a lot of stomach issues and an eating disorder. That actually started for me in 7th grade. I had a math class after lunch, and in that math class, we had quizzes every single day, and I would always be studying over the entire lunch period. And I was just so nervous about the math quiz next that I had no appetite and I wasn't able to eat. So it wasn't even about me trying to lose weight or going on some diet to try and lose weight. I just was so nervous that I wasn't eating enough, and that led to a really bad cycle for me and has impacted my life in such a way that I want to change what my students experience, because I know what not having that forum to express myself and to connect with my teachers on a more personal level did for me. Now, keep in mind, I had some of the most fantastic teachers. They were such great academic teachers. I learned so much. I did so well in school. I did so well in college. But that emotional piece, I didn't find that emotional support that I needed. I think there are so many ways to be able to connect with our students and get to know them on an individual level. I do believe that it starts with providing multiple platforms for students to express themselves and to express what they're feeling, and for us to check in with them on a daily basis. And for me, educational technology tools have been a huge piece of the answer. I started in 2010 by flipping my classroom. When I flipped my classroom, all of a sudden I opened up this space in class for us to talk, for me to walk around, to see how students were doing, to see how they were talking with their classmates, for me to join in on their conversations instead of me being stuck at the front of the room doing a lecture for the largest portion of class. Flipping my classroom was just the start. That led to my excitement for onboarding more tech tools that would allow me to get deeper insight into student needs on an individual basis and as a full class. The other thing, by flipping my classroom, I really was able to alleviate so much anxiety for my students. So they were so anxious before doing the homework because they had so many questions on it. They had to come to class and get all those questions answered. And by flipping my classroom, yes, watching the video lecture was hard, but they knew the next day in class I would be there to support them every step of the way as they solved the problems. And it wasn't just me that was going to be there for them. It was their classmates, because I opened up all this space now for them to do the problems in class together. That was a transformative moment to me, and I heard from parents, from students, just how much calmer they were at home doing their homework because, again, they were just watching a video and they knew the next day in class they were going to have all this time to talk to me and their classmates. Okay, so now let's move forward, and I want to highlight this quote by Susan Cain that really speaks to me because it calls out that hand-raising topic. So the quote says, "Society often overlooks us introverts. We idolize the talkers and the spotlight seekers as if they are the role models everyone should be emulating. I call this the extrovert ideal. This is a belief that we're all supposed to be quick-thinking, charismatic risk-takers who prefer action to contemplation. The extrovert ideal is what can make you feel as if there's something wrong with you because you're not at your best in a large group. It's an especially powerful force in schools where the loudest, most talkative kids are often the most popular and where teachers reward the students who are eager to raise their hands in class." Over the years, I've looked carefully at educational technology to create a classroom environment where all learners have a chance to respond in a way that is most comfortable to them. One essential tool for me has been Pear Deck. With Pear Deck, not only can I provide a forum for all students to express their ideas, I am able to show them that there are a variety of ways to contribute to the discussion. This oral, on-the-spot participation is not the only way for individuals to add their voice to the conversation. What's more, as a teacher, I get insight into how students are thinking through problems since I can see them working in real time. When I'm ready to show all responses on the board, I can shine the spotlight on what everyone in the classroom is saying without calling individual students out. And we can see all ideas represented and make room for the voices that may have gone unheard. Imagine if we creatively leveraged technology to shift away from a culture of consistently praising the loudest voices in the room and the first to raise their hand towards one where every person had a platform to make their ideas seen and heard. This isn't to say that Pear Deck is about students hiding behind their laptop, typing or drawing their response. Instead, Pear Deck provides a platform for all voices to contribute. Some students might need that think time to create a reply from behind their screen, and with Pear Deck, we can give them that opportunity. For the students whose best work is going to come out the moment that we move that conversation to the board and they have a chance to raise their hand and verbalize their thoughts, well, they still have that opportunity. What we are doing here is creating platforms that allow us to create a safe space for all students to contribute. Not only that, we provide such rich opportunity for peer-to-peer learning. With Pear Deck, I can pull all work up on the board without having to call an individual student out. We can easily celebrate multiple approaches. In a remote setting, when I'm doing a screen share for most of the period, it takes the attention away from my work and what I have to say and puts that spotlight back on what the students are saying. Not only that, we provide such rich opportunity for peer-to-peer learning. In using Pear Deck, I have the chance to pull student work up on the board without having to call an individual student up to the actual board. We can easily celebrate multiple approaches. In a remote setting, while I'm doing a screen share for most of the period, it takes the attention away from my work and what I have to share and puts a spotlight back on what students are actually saying. As students are answering questions before I show the responses on the screen, I really value that Pear Deck allows me to see them all working in real time. This helps me emphasize process over product. I can see how students are working through problems and get deep insight into where in the solution process an individual student might be getting stuck so that I can best address their needs. I'm really lucky that I have a class set of Wacom tablets, and that really allows me to see what individual students are writing as they're writing it. And when we bring the conversation back to the board, I can highlight multiple approaches. When I started using Pear Deck in this way, I realized how many unique approaches I never would have realized were marinating in a student's head had I not provided this platform to express that half-baked response. We can talk about the correct responses and the incorrect responses without calling an individual student out. There's tremendous learning that takes place in talking about all solution methods, and I have been able to build a classroom culture that honors mistakes as part of the learning process by embracing Pear Deck in this way. With Pear Deck, of course, a student can be typing behind their screen and individually contributing, but what it also does is help me identify which student I need to get around to first when I open up time for students to work independently or in groups. And again, the power of peer-to-peer learning in using Pear Deck should not be understated. It's important to take time, though, to show the responses on the screen and provide students time to talk about the replies that you're projecting. I usually select 3 or 4 that I want to discuss all together, and as students raise their hand to talk about those answers, it's sometimes going to be that we're hearing from the person who actually wrote that response. And you know what? It might just be that they never would have chimed in, but all of a sudden they're seeing that you chose their work and they're proud of that and they have the confidence to speak up. Other times you're going to hear from a different student. Perhaps they are talking about why they agree with the work of their classmate, or they will talk about how they interpreted the question differently. Again, it's providing platforms to allow all students to express what's in their head and their thoughts. The last topic that I want to touch on today is what happens at the conclusion of a lesson. First off, I regularly use the end of lesson templates that are provided by Pear Deck. Ending the lesson in this way gives me great insight into what students saw stressed versus what I think I was stressing that day. Additionally, it helps students summarize their own key reminders to look back on later. It's so important to give this time at the end of lessons for students to synthesize the material and pause to allow them to reflect and capture their thoughts before moving forward. Now, the Pear Deck takeaways are also so powerful. I actually collect the takeaways prior to every assessment. I ask students to go back and pull up some of the key Pear Decks that we have done in that unit. And then I ask them to use the space that Pear Deck already provides in the takeaways to write revisions and notes to self. And this forces students to look back at their prior work and their studying, which is such an important skill for them to learn. Now, let's put into practice what we've talked about today and wrap up with reflection. This is one of my favorite quotes from the book, Make It Stick. I share this with students regularly, and I'll share it with you today to prime us for some wrap up. When you practice elaboration, there's no known limit to how much you can learn. Elaboration is a process of giving new material meaning by expressing it in your own words and connecting it with what you already know. The more you can explain about the way your new learning relates to your prior knowledge, the stronger your grasp of the new learning will be, and the more connections you will create that will help you remember it later. So go ahead and pause and take a moment to think about your answer to that. And I'm also going to ask you to think about how you will leverage educational technology to build more equitable and empowering classrooms for all of your learners. What are some of the key benefits you see to using Pear Deck? What other takeaways are on your mind as we close the session today? And I'll close with a hope that more and more teachers will look to technology with whole child well-being in mind. It is through that lens that we can discover ways to humanize the classroom through the intentional integration of technology into the design of our lessons. I think that's where the magic happens. And finally, this quote from my book, Tech with Heart. How can we cultivate compassion in our classrooms through the intentional integration of technology into the design of our lessons? And I know I just repeated that twice, but it is for emphasis. I really believe that it starts with that intentional integration, starting with the why, and then looking to technology as a solution. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciated this opportunity to share some of the ways that technology has transformed my classroom and my teaching. I hope you enjoy. Okay, so now it's time for the demo portion of the presentation. So I'm going to show you how to build the slides to incorporate some of the ideas I talked about. So if you haven't used Pear Deck before, I'm using the add-on that's in Google Slides, and I open that Pear Deck add-on. I do have a premium account, so I'll be showing you all the features that are available. Just so you know, the text, choice, number, and website slides are free, but the draw and draggable are premium features. Also, the takeaways that I had talked about in the presentation are premium features. What I'm going to start with is this template library. And this template library, honestly, has made me a better teacher. It helped me ask better questions to my students. It reminded me check in with my students at the beginning of the lesson, during the lesson, at the end of the lesson, and we're going to talk about some of those slide types today. And also, they have other slide types like social emotional learning specific questions and critical thinking. We're going to go through a variety of these types today to apply some of the ideas we just talked about. So let's start with beginning of lesson. And so I love some of these. As you come in and get settled, follow these instructions. So let's start with that. All of these slides are designed by the Pear Deck team. The illustrations are already there. They're nicely designed, and you can customize them based on what you need. So while it suggests find your seat, take out your classroom device, and in Pear Deck answer this question, I might change it up and I might say, 1, check in with a person sitting near you, then take out your classroom device and class materials, and then in Pear Deck answer what did you learn about your classmate? Maybe we could celebrate some things as a class and so forth. So again, just giving you ideas and then getting creative with it from day to day and editing these so that they fit the class needs and also they really get at that checking in with each student and having students check in with one another. Let's look at some others. Draw 2 things you already know about today's topic. I think that's a great question type. Think of a question your classmates might have. What do you wonder about today's topic? How was the homework assignment? Thumbs up, thumbs down, draggable question type. This could also be a temperature check to see how students are doing today. So again, all of these are editable. Great inspiration here. Then say we go a couple slides into class and now we're ready to do it during class. So just a quick check. Take a moment, summarize what you've just learned. You could have them drag their dot to see how they're feeling. I really like this one. And I use it often and I change up the language here. So not just keep going, I understand, I'm a little confused and stop, I need help. You can edit all of these to whatever feels best for what you're doing. And I try and incorporate something about the question or something I want to get more information about my students from that day. So I do try and again, change up the text that happens there. So it's not redundant from day to day, but also I like to develop some patterns for my students. So I do like to do a beginning, middle, and end of class. But again, just shuffling the question types that I'm asking. There's a nice one of start a mind map. So just have students kind of summarize what they have learned so far in the middle of class, just taking a pause, let them synthesize the knowledge they've learned so far. I also really like this one that says students, it's time to stop blank and start blank. And that's like a goal setting thing. And they can put step 1, step 2, and step 3. So this is meant to be a transition template, but sometimes what I do is I actually change the type of question it is because I want them to type on this slide. So here's how I do that. Let me show you. Because this one is not meant to be any question type. You can see it just says students follow the instructions on this slide. But what you can actually do is go back again, and you can make this a drawing type slide so that students can type anywhere on the slide. First of all, delete this bottom bar because we don't need it, and then make it a drawing type slide so that students are going to be able to type text directly on the slide and also draw with their mouse. And so then they can fill the slide out. And then since I don't want step 1 to kind of be in the middle of their typing, I just delete those. If I have some specific directions on what I want them to stop and start and what I specifically want them to lay out the steps for, or sometimes just leave that blank and let them fill it out as we go about it. And I can show you when I go to present this, what this is going to look like and how students can fill it in. Let me go back to the template library, go back to during lesson, and just show you that they even have a stretch break in here. And do you feel comfortable sharing your thoughts out loud right now? Multiple choice type question. So again, just some little check-ins that you can do during class. And then end of class, some great connections, like connect to your own life. There's so much power in students connecting what they learned to prior knowledge, as we already talked about. So this is a great question type to ask. In 1 minute, write the most important thing. And I love that one. Like I was saying, I love to hear what students think was most important from what we said versus what I thought I had gotten across as most important. Do those things align? Just a temperature check. How are we feeling now? Pretend your friend was absent from class today. Write out what they had missed. So you allow students to summarize it in their own words, some other reflections also. And then let me just show you the social emotional learning templates. So we have a moment of silence. What's filling your bucket today and what's draining it? I love that. That's another drawing slide type. And then let me show you the stress check, which is a draggable. And I just want to gather a couple different slide types so that when I do the demo of what it looks like for students, you'll be able to see different slide types. Can you imagine someone having a different perspective than you on this topic? That's really nice. An active listening type question. What differed between your opinions? So again, checking in with students, allowing them to see how they agree and disagree with others in their class. Did you find this lesson interesting and challenging? Again, they have other ones here, critical thinking. They have subject area specific templates, but I think that's enough for the demo portion. And let me go ahead and start the lesson. And I'm going to put this in student paced mode so that you can see what it would look like for students to just kind of scroll through some of these slides. And so this is my teacher view where I would be able to see all students logged in and how they're answering. You can see that's why I'm waiting for responses here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what it looks like on the student end. So I'm going to log in as a student. I'm going to just copy this link and open another tab to pretend I'm a student right now. And you can see that when you log in, Pear Deck automatically asks, how are you feeling? So it does this climate check. If you've never seen that before, by the way, it is something that you can enable. Let me show you before we move on how to enable that. So if I go to my teacher login and I go to my settings under my account and then settings, you want to turn on the classroom climate. And here's also, if you don't have takeaways enabled, how you can turn on the takeaways. All right, now that we've done that, let me show you what this looks like for a student. So here's the demo portion. So here was one where students just answer the question on the side because this was a text type slide. So I learned XYZ, and then let me go back as a teacher, and you can see in real time that's coming in, and I'm able to see what that student is saying. This is the teacher dashboard where there's names attached. There's also another projector view where you would be able to display all the answers anonymously. And this view is, of course, what I always project on the main board. This has no names attached. The teacher dashboard has the names attached. Okay, let's go back as a student. And here's a draggable question type. So I can just go ahead and drag my dot. Then the next one, this was the drawing type. And so you could go ahead and just draw. You can see it's quite thick, but I can change the size of my pen and also the color of my pen. And now I can draw. I can also type some text. Just like that. I can change the color of my text, move it around. I can also change the size of my text, bigger and smaller. And I can also type in any of these boxes here. Type it, move it, resize it. There we go. So that's how easy it is for students to fill it out. And then from the teacher end, I can see all their work coming in real time. So that's wonderful. I can just scroll through it all, or I can look in grid layout so that I could see more answers at once. And then I wanted to show the stress check. So this is another draggable type, but it's a draggable line. So you can see how all students in the classroom are feeling. And this overlaid layout would actually stack up all the answers on one, so you could see where the whole class is in terms of how they're feeling, instead of individually one by one that you would have to scroll through. So that overlaid layout is a beautiful way to get a quick temperature check. So hopefully you now have a better understanding of how I really rely on the Pear Deck sidebar, not just the questions that I can add, the interactivity that I can add to any of the slides that I've made, but also really trying to use the template library that Pear Deck has so thoughtfully built to make my lessons even better for my students.
Now, in this final part of the demo, I want to show you how to put into practice some of the strategies on navigating the teacher and projector dashboard that we talked about, such as starring certain answers and highlighting them on the board. So at any time when you want to get back into a session that you had opened previously, you go to peardeck.com, you go to the Sessions tab, and you have two views. You have a classroom view, which is what's on your projector, and you have a teacher dashboard view, and that's where the names are attached. So what I recommend is if you have the classroom view open already, that was what we were looking at before. So why don't we start there? And then you can go down to the three dots, and then you can just open the dashboard in a new window. So I'm going to split my screen so that we can look at both things at the same time. And by splitting my screen, all I mean is that I have two windows open. So I'm going to just resize my window, and I'm doing this manually. There are some plugins to do it automatically. If you're on Windows, it will snap into place, but I'm just doing it manually, keeping things very simple here. So I'm going to move this window over on the left. So I have this kind of split screen where I have the projector view on the left, and I have the teacher dashboard on the right. Now, if I'm doing a Zoom screen share, Google Meet screen share, then you can just share one single window. And that's what I recommend in a virtual setting. When you're in the classroom, you might need to open the teacher dashboard on another device so that your students aren't able to see all the names attached. What I personally do when I'm in my normal face-to-face classroom is I just have this projector view up on the board, and then I can freeze my projector remote so that I can move over to this other window and kind of check in on individual students, but that is not reflected on my projector in the front of the classroom. So if you have a projector that allows you to press a freeze button, that would be my recommendation. But let me just go ahead and assume that you know how to navigate your own projector and that you can keep the focus on just this screen on your projector and then have this either open on another device or in another window that's not being projected. Okay, so now I just have two responses here. If I wanted to just highlight one of the responses on the board, like my classmate got a puppy, then from the teacher dashboard, if I click this star button, then it will only show whichever of the responses I have starred. And I can star more than one of them if I wanted to project both of them. I can also clear all stars, and clearing all stars would again project all the responses. But I could just go through and select a couple of responses that I want to highlight, maybe an incorrect answer and a correct answer so that we can talk about both of them, or we could talk about two different perspectives. That is how I would kind of set things up ahead of time so that what I'm putting on the projector is just really what we want to have a conversation about, and I can just draw attention to one thing at a time. So again, that is controlled only in the teacher dashboard, and then it will reflect in the projector, whatever you had starred. You can then clear all stars. In case you ever get a response that is inappropriate that you don't want shown on the projector, here is where you can hide the response. So if I hide the response, then it goes away. And if you accidentally do that, you can show the response again. So that's another way to toggle responses on and off. When we're looking at the draggable dot type, it is automatically going to put all of the dots on top of one another in this overlaid layout view. But sometimes you might want to talk about one response at a time, and then you can change to the list layout and again, just put the attention on one response at a time. In addition, if you are in the overlaid layout in your teacher dashboard, then you don't see the person's name underneath. Like in the last slide, I saw name. And that's because if you hover over the dot, you're going to see the name. But if you wanted to see them all listed out, one student at a time, you can go to the list layout and then you would see the names, or the grid layout to see it all in a grid. So that's one other strategy there. Let's move to the slide that was a stress check. So the same sort of thing goes here when I show the responses. I can have the multiple layouts. And this was the one that I was saying that having the overlaid layout is really nice here so that you can see where the whole class is at and how they're feeling. And you can talk about this. So again, bring it to the board, have a discussion. Say that you do this stress check in class, but you see that people are really like something's bothering them or they can't manage their emotions. And it's a moment where you're like, oh, I want to hear more from the student, but I hadn't asked it in the Pear Deck ahead of time. I didn't know that it was something that we needed to really discuss today. And so in that instance, what you can do is you can click this plus button and you can ask a question on the fly. So if you go to the last slide, you could actually change this from a draggable. You can add on a text. It doesn't delete the question that was just asked. It just adds another one into your presentation. So you could do that and ask it on the fly. So now what that does on the student end is it gives them a slide where in the previous question, they had done this temperature check and told me where they fit on the scale. But now I'm leaving them actual answer space to type out and tell me more. Just like that. And you can see how real time that comes in to me, which is what I love about Pear Deck. So now from the teacher end, you can see those responses. The previous slide was their temperature check. And now I had an opportunity for them to tell me just a little bit more. So sometimes we need that on the fly, and that's what the new prompt is there for you. From the new prompt, you have so many of those beginning of class that we talked about that we love, the during class, the end of class. On the next screen, you have ones that are more blank. So if you just want students to be able to type a response and you just say something orally out loud, a prompt for them to respond to. You want them to draw on a blank slide. You want to know if they agree or disagree or true, false on the spot. You can do those. And then that last screen allows you to add a different question type to the slide that you already had pre-created in the slide deck. So those are really helpful. Again, how do we allow all students to share at a time when they really need to share with us? And sometimes, like we just saw on this slide, if you saw that something was really bothering a lot of your class, you might want to open up that space for them to share. And in this case, when they're sharing on this Tell Me More slide, I would not project the student work. So I would keep this hidden. I would tell students that before they start typing. I would tell them, I'm not going to be projecting these responses. Just tell me what's bothering you today. And I would never show the responses on the board. And I would just follow up with students individually by checking my teacher dashboard and seeing what they were saying. So that is my strategy. And then the last thing that I want to show is how you get that climate check. Remember when students first joined this Pear Deck, they put a smiley face or a frowny face depending on how they were feeling. So how you find that information is you need to look on your teacher dashboard. And when you're in your teacher dashboard, let me go back to a question where I had 2 students reply. This little icon, that icon is what they rated on that climate check. So student 1 rated a smiley face, but Stacy Roshan did the kind of middle face in between. So that's how you find that information. That information is not visible on the projector view anywhere. You do have to go into the teacher dashboard and you'll see that icon next to their name, and that's what that means. Okay, so that's going to wrap up all of my strategies. I hope that you picked up a tip or two and a lot of things that you'll be able to apply directly in your classroom. Thank you so much for joining me today. Bye.